On February 9th of 2004, 21-year-old UMass student Maura Murray drove from her dorm in Amherst, Massachusetts to the White Mountains of New Hampshire.
At approximately 7:27 p.m., Maura spun out her 1996 Saturn on a hairpin turn on Route 112 in North Haverhill. There has never been a credible sighting of Maura since.
Maura is 5 foot 7 inches tall. She weighs 120 pounds, and she has brown hair and hazel eyes.
If you have any information regarding Maura's disappearance, please submit it to us,
The Murray family at MauraMurrayFamilyDirect@gmail.com.
or the New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit.
This is Missing Maura Murray. Welcome back to Missing Maura Murray. I'm Tim, here today with Lance, being joined virtually. Lance, how are you today?
I am doing so well, sitting here in my isolation, feeling good about everything. How are you today?
Oh, I am just fine, Lance. Can't complain. And this episode today, Lance, that we're bringing our lovely, lovely audience is a really interesting, thought-provoking discussion with two friends of the show, two doctors, Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg, and they do a podcast called Women in Crime. We also had them on Crawlspace, I want to say in 2019, to talk about their other podcast called Direct Appeal. And so this is their spin-off. And Lance, in this episode, we speak about the missing person, Sarah Stern, and which is a fascinating case, and a woman killer named Sheila Davalloo.
Yeah, you guys might recognize the guests here from, like you said, Direct Appeal, where they focused on Melanie McGuire. Again, this is their spin-off one, and Sarah Stern is a baffling one because it deals with the abandoned vehicle that we often talk about with Maura Murray. Her car was abandoned, and how law enforcement handles that, and just the process that goes into figuring out when we determine this person's missing, and then, you have to go into the investigation, her past, and what she was even doing in that area. Fascinating conversation here.
It is, and her body was never found, too, and it actually went to trial, so that kind of harkens back to what we were talking about a few weeks ago with Michelle Kazuba with no body prosecution cases.
Right, and that's pretty rare. You need a certain amount of evidence that can go from circumstantial to enough to convince a jury that something definitely happened to this individual.
Okay, everybody, so I hope you enjoy the interview with doctors Amy and Meghan. And check out our Patreon page over at Crawlspace. It's patreon.com/crawlspacepodcast. We've been pretty active with at least one episode a week. $5 a month gets you full access.
And check out all of our new shows at crawlspace-media.com, and anything that's coming up for live events. We'll try to keep you informed as things happen, as things develop in this current age of isolation, when we're going to be out there live in the public. So check out crawlspace-media.com.
On this date, April 23rd, 1973, 16-year-old Timothy Gerard McKernan left his home in the 1600 block of Weaverly Drive in Petaluma, California at approximately 7 a.m.
He left on his bike. His bike was then later found at the Petaluma Public Library, but Timothy never returned home. He was 5 foot 9 inches to about 5 foot 10 inches, 130 pounds, with brown hair, blue eyes, and a scar on his upper lip.
Timothy was wearing a white pinstripe shirt and gray pants. He was a sophomore at St. Vincent's High School when he vanished.
And anyone with information should contact the Petaluma Police Department at 707-778-4372. And for more information, check out charlieproject.org and search Timothy Gerard McKernan.
Welcome back to Crawlspace. Doctors Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. How are you today?
Great, thank you.
Great. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing really well. This is a great time to be interviewing the two of you, because when you were last on the show, we had such a fun interview, and I don't even want to call it an interview. We had a fun conversation and really had some yucks, and I feel like we could all use some yucks right now. So welcome back.
I was thinking the same thing. I think we're also just excited to be like working and podcasting and just, keeping ourselves busy doing stuff we like right now.
We're very lucky that we can do this type of work during a quarantine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know. Well, you got a nice setup there.
We realized after we did direct appeal that it was more beneficial to build a small home studio and do it ourselves. So we definitely like the setup better. We also had a lot of issues with our studio.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, it looks very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us again. Would love to talk about your new podcast. Of course, our listeners may recall an episode with you both about your podcast Direct Appeal and the murder of Bill McGuire, and of course the podcast dealt with Melanie McGuire and if she was wrongfully convicted or not. Is there anything you would like to tell us about that case or that podcast before we discuss your new show, Women in Crime?
Well, since we aired all the final episodes, I mean, we've definitely had some tips come in, some helpful, some not so much. But Melanie also receives some representation now, and we are also working with 2020 to air a 2-hour feature on the case. So we're hoping that will really bring in some information.
Do you mean representation like an agent?
Oh, no. Sorry. Lawyers.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Pro bono. Someone offered to do her case, to help her out pro bono from the podcast. So.
Oh, wow. Because they heard the podcast. Yeah. Oh, nice. And
Yeah.
this is a lawyer who contacted you two or contacted her and said that they...
No, it's a firm, a small firm in Jersey, and they contacted Melanie directly. And I believe one of the lawyers had known the case and was, kind of interested always, and then listened to the podcast, and then they got in touch with her. So she has some good pro bono representation right now, which is good for her.
Will that be able to help her case or her situation?
Well, we'll see what they do in terms of filings, what their actual plan is. Right now, I wouldn't want to say too much because I don't want to jeopardize any of her appeals. So it's possible. It's always nice, though. She's at a point where she's not getting any representation. So for two reputable lawyers to step in and say, here, we'll help you out and let's discuss the plan, that's a lot better than not having that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been in jail for 13 years?
Right, 13 years.
13 years. And has she ever had any consistent representation during that time?
No, she's had several attorneys throughout the process, which is usually the case when you go from next step to next step, from one appeal to next. You usually get a new attorney. But even within her trial, I think she switched attorneys maybe 4 times. And then so through the course, she's probably had 7 or 8 attorneys.
Gotcha. All right. So are you two going to be doing a follow-up to Direct Appeal as sort of a behind the scenes of what's happening on the 2020 special?
We definitely will at some point. And we were actually the 2020 was slated to air, this month or in April. But because of, the coronavirus situation, they had to take people off of the story and put them on that. So,
well, not only that, our interviews we did one in-person interview. We had 2 follow-up interviews, but obviously nobody's doing interviews at the moment. So,
but we'll definitely have some updates at some point, and we'll want to open the tip line again and make that everyone aware of that, especially when the 2020 episode comes out, in terms of providing any information that might be relevant to the case.
Gotcha. Great. Well, yeah, keep us updated on that. That's good news.
Sure will.
But let's pivot to your new podcast, the Bonafide hit, Women and Crime. Tell us about your show. What is the inspiration?
So the inspiration really came after Direct Appeal. So a lot of people were emailing us suggesting that we look into different cases. Have you heard of this case? Have you heard of that case? Can you look into this? You should deep dive this. And I think after reviewing a lot of the requests, and, I teach women in crime, so I'm always interested in different female cases. I think what happened was I just said to Amy, we have a lot of interest in women in crime and individual stories. And you and I individually have worked on so many different cases. What do you think about doing women in crime?
And nobody had the name. We were shocked that podcast was available. We're like, what? We might as well take that. That was the first thing you did, was claim that name.
I think so, yeah. It particular, too, because I realize our listeners were interested, just like our students are, in how gender affects females as victims, offenders, both. So, what's the gendered experience? Mm-hmm. So we were like, yeah. I remember thinking, Amy's right, someone must be doing women in crime. But not exactly.
I mean, there are people doing, but no one took the name. So the name was a good one. But
That's
also,
funny.
I think doing something episodic was, at least I think Meghan would probably agree because she did most of the legwork for direct appeal. That took over 2 years. When you do an episodic podcast, as you guys know, it's a lot more manageable. And I can participate a lot more. And the burden is now not only on Meghan. We switch off every time we record. So that's also nice to be able to pitch in more.
Very cool. Lance has been nagging me about a podcast called Men and Crime.
Every day.
I keep telling him that it's not a good name. But
every day. Well,
the name's not going to sell, Lance.
No, the original name was Two Young Studs in Crime. And then Tim was like, it's not 1998 anymore, Lance. You should probably rethink the title. That is pretty remarkable, though, that Women in Crime wasn't taken. Do you think it's just such a good name people thought, oh, it must be taken, and no one actually followed up?
There's one female criminals, and so, someone's focusing on females specifically as criminals, but I just thought all things women in crime are interesting. Maybe it's maybe it's too general for some people. For us, it was perfect because it kind of encapsulates everything we want to do.
Yeah, because we're not pigeonholed in one type of case.
No.
As long as there's a woman involved, whether she be the offender, the victim, the lawyer, it doesn't matter.
And it's great because Amy and I have very different, this is a weird thing to say, but very different taste in cases. So we went through our list, we made our own list and compared them, and we didn't have one name in common, which is a little bizarre.
Yep.
Wow. And how do you two react when people call you the Tim and Lance of true crime podcasting?
I take it as the ultimate compliment.
It's an honor. It's a true honor.
Two young women in crime.
There you go.
But it's not 1998 for us either.
No. Some people have said that we're stuck in the 50s. So,
well, by that comparison, Women in Crime would be your crawl space. So I love it.
I think so. Thank you.
So let's discuss one of the latest episodes that you've released. It's about a case, a victim by the name of Sarah Stern. It caught my eye immediately because of some similarities to Maura Murray in that there was a car found and Sarah was missing for a period of time.
Correct. And also, to this day, Sarah's body has never been discovered. So that's another, similarity that, it's still, although it's very clear what happened in Sarah's case, unfortunately, there hasn't been closure for her family in that regard.
All right. Take us back a little bit to what her case is for those who aren't aware or familiar.
Okay. So Sarah Stern was a young woman living in New Jersey by the Jersey Shore. And she lived with her mother. Her mother had passed away, unfortunately, a few years prior. She was going to a local community college, kind of hanging out with her high school crew, people that didn't go away to college. She had a kind of a close-knit crew. Her father was away in Florida. Somebody called in an abandoned car on a bridge, and quickly they were able to find out where it was registered. The police did a welfare check to the Stern household, and that's where, I guess you could say that's where the story starts. So they find this car. They know that's registered to Sarah's grandmother, but everyone knows that Sarah is the one who drives the car. Sarah's nowhere to be found. They go to her home, and she is not there. And then, they start the search looking for Sarah.
And how old is Sarah?
Sarah was 19 years old.
And they never found her.
No, this is December 2016. So the police went to the Stern household. They talked to some of the neighbors, and there's this narrative emerging that, well, maybe Sarah took her own life, or maybe Sarah went to Canada. although that doesn't make sense because her car was found. And so how it gotten to Canada, also her beloved dog was found in the home along with her passport and money. So quickly they're thinking, all right, the Canada story doesn't really hold water. That earlier that day, she had dropped off some belongings at a neighbor's home. And unfortunately, we know that people that are contemplating suicide will often give away belongings. So that fed into the narrative. People were saying she seemed a little depressed. Maybe she actually jumped off the bridge, right? So that's where this narrative starts. However, they quickly kind of switch gears. They find out that she had spent the day, that day that she went missing, that she had spent the day with one of her good friend, Liam. And they were able to go talk to him. And he said, yeah, we spent the day together. We went to Taco Bell. We drove around. They checked out. His story was totally corroborated by surveillance cameras, receipts. He was all good. He went to work that night at 5 p.m. Everything's great. However, they start looking at him a little bit because he seems like he might be hiding something. I'm skipping a little bit because there's a lot to this case. If you listen to the episode, you'll hear it's like 40 minutes long, and even that was, cut down a bit. But So they find out that Sarah had gone to her bank that day of her disappearance, and she went to her safety deposit box. So naturally, the police want to see what's in that safety deposit box, and they find $25,000 in cash. Yes.
I have to ask, what 19-year-old has a safety deposit box? And why is there so much money in there?
Okay, exactly. So that's what the police want to know, of course. So they're thinking, all right, so now we could see maybe motive starting to come out, or maybe, first of all, if she fled, wouldn't she have taken this money with her? But then they come to find out that Sarah's mother had passed away, as I mentioned, a few years prior, and she had left Sarah quite a bit of money. And Sarah had been telling people, some accounts were that she had $50,000 cash, other accounts say $100,000 cash. So they find the safety deposit box, $25,000 cash. They're thinking, okay, where's the missing money? Did she take this money and flee? Or why didn't she take all this money? Why does she have this money? Could this have been a motive for someone to do something to her?
And wasn't the money itself, if I recall, like really old money?
Yes, it was very old money. It actually would disintegrate. When they touched it, it would disintegrate. It was very old money, and you'll understand why that's actually an important part of the story. But anyway, so they come to find out that Liam was actually at the bank with Sarah, waiting in the car while Sarah got this money. So they're starting to see that Liam might be a little more involved than he had initially said, but they have nothing on him. So they don't really have much to go on until they get a tip. Right, like usual. I just want to be able to tell you guys how long it took for this tip to emerge.
I just want to ask a quick question about the money.
Mm-hmm.
So her mother dies in 3 years before, correct? In 2013,
correct.
And she's left an inheritance. So this money is part of an inheritance from her mother.
Actually, her father actually had no idea about the money. Apparently, the mother was a little weary of big banks and a little bit, maybe she was a hoarder. So they had this second property. So Sarah had found all this money in an old shoebox in their second home. And we don't know if it was inheritance or, what the purpose of all this money was. But we do know that Sarah did take the money and, put it into a bank. And so what happened was eventually... Sorry, guys, you're going to have to edit some of this when I sound stupid because I can't get my dates right. But basically what happens is somebody calls in a tip to a detective. One of the detective's friends said, my son has something he wants to talk about. Turns out Liam has a good friend who was a horror film director.
And this is Anthony?
Anthony, you're so good. Yes, Anthony. Yeah, so Anthony was living in Brooklyn. He had gone to high school with Sarah and Liam and this other friend, Preston, who will come into play in a moment. And he said that Liam had called him and asked him if the police had contacted him to talk about Sarah's disappearance. So that's kind of weird. Why would you call someone and ask them if the police have contacted them? So he starts to think this is a little weird, and he remembers that Liam had said to him, I have an idea for a movie. It's about, strangling Sarah and throwing her off of a bridge. And then, of course, when when Sarah's missing, Anthony starts thinking like, okay, things are looking kind of weird now. Liam's calling me, asking me if the police contacted me, and he mentioned this idea for a movie that is eerily similar to something that is going on right now. So they set up a sting operation. They have Anthony and Liam meet up. And Anthony, Liam, they meet together. Liam gets in Anthony's car. The first thing he does is check Anthony for a wire. Luckily, the police were smart and they did not wire him. They wired the car. So Liam obviously is ready to say something, right? They have police on standby, watching this all unfold. And you can look this up online. It's incredible. Liam gives a full confession to Anthony with the police sitting nearby in cars and says basically what happened. He spent the day with his good friend Sarah. They were good friends growing up by all accounts. He knew about the money that she had. He wanted that money. He pretty much choked her, strangled her to death. And unfortunately, according to him, when I say unfortunately, this is his words, he only got away with $10,000. He killed.
That wasn't the real impetus for his crime, though, right? Because the money was nice, but didn't he just want to kill someone?
Well, he also had said that he always wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone, and he was a little bit disappointed. It didn't deliver. This is what he tells Anthony on camera with the police all listening and watching this. Okay. There's no body and the police are hearing this confession, but they still need to corroborate this story. So Liam goes on to talk about the old money and how he got the money, but the money was old and disintegrating. Remember the money in Sarah's safe deposit box, right? So they were able to kind of, they start building a case by all these similarities because, of course, you don't know if he's just telling a story, but now it's starting to match up with other evidence they have. What he ends up doing is after he killed Sarah, he went to work. He was a waiter at a local steakhouse. His buddy Preston, who was actually Sarah's prom date, another good friend, not romantically involved, but they were all good friends. Preston goes to Sarah's home, and the issue is Liam had left his cell phone. So his buddy Preston, Liam called him, I'm on my way to work, just killed Sarah. But actually, he must have called him when he was there if he left his cell phone. But he pretty much said, can you go to the house and try to find my cell phone? He goes to Sarah's house. He moves the body. He pretty much walks. Eventually, he ends up confessing to police and walking them through all of this. He also shows them where a safe is buried with the money that matches the money in Sarah's safe deposit box. When they eventually do arrest Liam, and the key to the safe is found on Liam's keychain. So, they have a lot of evidence now.
Yeah, I mean, talk about just like a blood trail, like leading right to the criminal. That's incredible. And didn't he say something about the amount of time that it took him to murder her, which is sort of suggestive of like having no remorse for this, having no empathy for this?
Yeah. So he said two really horrifying things in his taped confession, the unknown to him taped confession. One was that he had set a timer because he wanted to see how long it would take her to die. And when the police got his phone, they were able to retrieve that timer, and they found out it did take her close to half an hour to succumb to her injuries, which is just horrifying. And then he also goes on to kind of laugh about how her stupid dog just sat there and watched the whole thing, kind of alluding to the fact that the dog didn't do anything because she had this, beloved dog that was home. He's just really so callous. So you have to look up these tapes. They also 2020 very ironically just aired her story this past Friday. Yeah, it includes a lot of the footage from his confession.
I thought the method too was, you said choking, but how did he actually kill her based on what he said?
Well, he lifted her up by her neck with his hand and like held her up against the wall, but then he also shoved a shirt down her throat and I guess held her nose, watched her pretty much suffocate to death.
Sarah's body still has not been found, but yet he's gone through some legal proceedings. He's in prison currently, eh?
Oh, for sure. Yes, he was found guilty. Of course, it did go to trial, the case. Preston, not surprisingly, Preston took a plea.
Of course.
And he testified against Liam. So Preston got a nice plea deal. He pled guilty to robbery and conspiracy in exchange for his testimony against Liam. So he did end up with 18 years for his role, which I think is Maybe
That's
a little soft, considering
That's
that
a good deal for the crime.
it's a good deal
and
for
he'll
him,
get out
but-
in 15 or less.
Well, I guess at least he confessed. Maybe they were being a little lenient there because there's still no body. So, I mean, maybe his confession is the reason the trial went ahead at all, right?
Well, keep in mind they had a videotape because they had the sting operation. So they actually would have been fine without Preston, but Preston just corroborated a lot, and he actually walked the police. Like, he took them, and all of this is on like the body cams of the officers. He took them to the Stern household and literally walked them through exactly what they did to the body and everything, going back to the beginning of the story. Liam drove Sarah's car with Sarah's dead body in the front seat to the bridge, and Preston followed him. And then Liam and Preston together threw her body over the bridge. So Preston was very much an accomplice in this. Although they didn't find the body, though, that would typically make things difficult, to try the case. But it was obviously, there was so much evidence. Also, they had powerful testimony from experts who testified that the water current, the night in question, Sarah's body, so it was thrown into the Shark River, which goes, right into the ocean, and it would have taken less than 24 hours for her body to be 7 miles offshore. In other words, they said her body's not going to be recovered, and we would not expect it to be based on where the body was thrown in.
Oh, that's really fascinating. Yeah, that's interesting. I just want to interject really quickly.
Yeah.
We were talking with our buddy Michelle Kazuba, who is a prosecutor, and we started talking about no body cases and reasonable doubt and circumstantial evidence, and everything that is a check mark for convicting someone without a body seems to be on Liam, which is everything from the motive and the means, the confession, right down to the why the body isn't even discoverable. There's an expert saying it just went into the ocean in 24 hours. I mean, it's
I don't even think they needed that
case. Oh, it was
agree.
yeah, exactly. That was just like a bonus.
And icing on the cake for them. So not surprisingly, Liam got life without parole for the murder of Sarah Stern, along with several other charges. So he will not be seeing the light of day, thankfully.
Well, that's good.
And Preston got 18 years, you said?
Correct.
How old is Preston?
He's young, so he'll be out. I mean, these boys were, by the time of trial, maybe 21. So, he'll still have a whole life ahead of him.
I find that disconcerting.
Yeah.
That part
I find that
bothers me.
disconcerting too. I mean, to entertain someone's hypothetical conversation in the form of I got a good screenplay for you, I have a movie for you, and it's very close to their reality is one thing, and you can almost walk away from that and say, like, that was weird. Maybe I should not, hang out with this person or something. But then to physically touch a dead body and help move a dead body, throw it into the water.
He helped bury the safe.
Yeah, exactly. Did Liam have some sort of hold over Preston? Was there some sort of relationship there that is deeper?
Yeah, of course, there was some speculation that Liam was, the ringleader, and Preston, displayed personality traits that would make him, be the one to be more likely coerced into something like this. But I mean, it didn't seem like it's not like it was duress or anything where Liam put a gun to his head and said, do this or I'll kill you. It was very much voluntary. And of course, Liam and Preston knew that there was money involved. Although Liam said he wanted the thrill of killing, Preston was promised money for helping out Liam. So for Preston, the motivation may have just been financial, which I guess is better than if the motivation is just for the thrill of it. But either way, I'm not sure I want him walking the streets in less than 20 years.
I'm sure Liam, because he's clearly psychopathic, he has the real antisocial tendencies. Those type of personalities have a way of also being coercive, more manipulative, more charming about it, more convincing. So I'm sure that if Preston was, somewhat coerced, it would make sense given Liam's personality type as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Liam and Sarah were childhood friends too?
Yes. So they were those friends that, they grew up together. They kind of ran in the same circle. Sarah, by all accounts, was a little more popular. Liam was a little more of a loner, not surprising now that we, know what we know about him. But they were those friends that always, ran in the same circle. Like I said, a lot of their friends went away to college. They went to community college, so they started, hanging out a little more. He even said that on his Facebook page that Sarah was his sister. When he played that up a lot to the police, and because the police interviewed him several times before they were able to start piecing this together. And you can see it online. It's just a bunch of him talking about how they were best friends and it was like a sister. He really played up that relationship. But Sarah's father, knew him since he was a young boy.
And what about Preston? The three of them were tight?
So
sort of together?
So Sarah and Liam were friends. Liam and Preston were friends. So Preston and Sarah were newer friends. Like I said, they had gone to the prom together the previous year. But it was more like Liam was like the middleman between them.
It's not the same, but it's making me think of the Skylar Nice case with the three together, the three tight friends, and, two of them kill. And the betrayal that Sarah must have felt when she realized that her two close friends are the ones that are murdering her. It's not a stranger.
She never knew Preston was involved in it, right?
True.
Right.
Sorry. The betrayal of the one close friend.
But still, it's her close friend, but yeah.
Well, and who knows what the hell he was saying to her while he was murdering her.
Yep. Who knows?
He doesn't horrific to even think of.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I find it pretty interesting that her body, they assumed, was all the way out to the ocean. You said 7 miles already. I guess she was murdered basically near an ocean town.
Oh, yeah. So this is in Belmar, New Jersey, which is, essentially the Jersey Shore. And it was her body was thrown into the Shark River, which feeds directly into the ocean.
But does not have sharks in it.
Does not have sharks in it. Does not. No. And there's still quite a memorial on that bridge. It's very close to my house. And, they do, on the anniversary, there's always a whole memorial, and, there's a big visual. So it wasn't very long ago, but she lived in a very tight knit, small community, and her and her family were very well known in the community. Was
there anything sexual between the three of them that you know of?
Not at all. I'm actually not sure what her sexual orientation was, but there was, by all accounts, Preston and Sarah went to prom as friends, strictly platonic, and there was never any, romantic involvement between any of them.
Which is odd, because you usually think a crime like this will also have some type of sexual motivation.
Exactly. Yep. She was not sexually assaulted or.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly where my head was going, was that there was some jealousy. There had to be some underlying jealousy or something, some sexual rage there, because it just feels so
senseless,
hollow. Yeah, it's like you just wanted to kill somebody. And even the money, it's almost like the money was the trigger, because it gave a better excuse than I just want to kill somebody. It was like, it was now, at least you could attach like a financial aspect to it.
Yeah, it's almost like, if I'm going to kill someone, I might as well get this little extra on top of it. Why not?
But clearly, I mean, I think Amy would probably agree, if he didn't kill Sarah, he would have killed someone else.
Correct. Yep.
Yes.
She was just
at
the
some
unlucky
point.
person. Absolutely.
Yeah. I can totally see that. I can totally see someone using, the money as like, yeah, exactly. I get a little bit extra. I now have my excuse to kill, and it feels a little bit more justified if you attach, if you expected to get $50,000, you attach a number to it. It's just easily more, I guess, consumable or justifiable to someone, as opposed to having to come to terms with, like, I'm just a shitty person that needs to kill somebody.
I think it was also a bit of a crime of opportunity as well, because he knew that the father was away. She was alone in the home. He knew that, this money was available. So I think it was almost a perfect storm. He had these feelings that, like, I want to kill someone. Oh, my friend has money and her father's away. She's alone in this home. This might be like the perfect time.
So your podcast is so great, and you have been covering some really interesting cases. And I just wanted to talk about another one real quick. Sheila Davalloo, I found to be a very interesting case. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
So Sheila Davalloo. And so Sheila Davalloo, I found this case to be so interesting, and I was surprised that it's not been covered more extensively, to be honest. So Sheila Davalloo was convicted of 2 crimes. The initial crime that she's convicted of was pretty controversial. She was It was 2003. She's at her home one day, and I think it was Pleasantville, New York, with her husband. And the way she describes it is their marriage was kind of, simmering. And, she wanted to do something to kind of sauce things up a little bit. So she suggests playing a game, like a blindfold game, and I'll touch you with an object and you guess what it is and you do the same. And I think, he probably thought, okay, that's a great idea to start off. But the object that she decided to touch him with was a knife, which I'm sure he didn't expect. And she stabbed him in the chest with this knife. And so she stabs him, and she actually winds up calling 911 at some point. He's crying out in pain, yelling at her. There's a lot of commotion. She said she called 911. She didn't really call 911. And what she told him was that, this is not humorous, but to me, this part was, she said, "I'm sorry, I called 911. They said they're too busy. They have other things to do." So, eventually she actually puts him in the car, winds up driving him to the hospital. But they speed past the hospital, and they're in another parking lot, and he claims that he's in the backseat of the car, like, "What are you doing? Get me to the ER," and she stabs him again. And their altercation comes outside of the car, and a bunch of people see, and they intercede, and they sort of save him. And he makes it to the hospital, and he survives. So he survives this stabbing by his wife being stabbed, a couple of different times. She speeds off, by the way. Leaves him, just speeds off.
Did he guess that it was a knife?
I'm going to have to say yes on that one. If not, the doctors definitely informed him. He made a full recovery.
Okay.
And so Sheila's charged with attempted murder of her husband. And so, I can go through the trial with you if you want. The whole story is bizarre, though, right?
When did this happen? What year was this?
So this happened in 2003, and the police called her in right away. They haul her into an interrogation, and Sheila talks to them, which is not really the smartest thing to do. But she talks to them willingly. She doesn't know what's happened, though. So she's explaining a story where she's saying, like, this game happened, but she snapped and stabbed him because she had PTSD. She grew up in like a war-torn Iran and said that there was a lot of violence. She witnessed a lot of things, and certain things are triggers for her. This triggered her. She snapped. She stabbed him. But then she clearly wasn't trying to kill him because, look, if I was trying to kill him, why would I drive him to the hospital? So that's her explanation.
How big was the knife? She started repeatedly stabbing him? And
no,
he still
I don't
survived?
think she repeatedly stabbed him. I think she only stabbed him once at first, and then she stabbed him again in the car, and it was some type of knife. So it wasn't like, this 27 stab wound. It was a few stab wounds, which is not to say it wasn't enough, but enough so that he survived, and enough that maybe once she stabbed him, she got scared. Maybe once because he screamed out in pain, he said, and he cried out immediately, and, the shock of it maybe shocked her as well.
And what happened? She also stabbed her boyfriend's lover, Annalisa?
Yeah, so here's what happens. Sheila, first she goes to trial for the attempted murder of her husband. And she winds up being convicted and getting a really staunch sentence, actually. She winds up being convicted and being sentenced to 25 years in prison, like a minimum, which is kind of a lot for her conviction. And so they find out, or just so you know, also during this time, her husband defended her the whole time. He said he believed in her. He didn't think she really meant it. He was by her side. His family came to court and testified on her behalf as well. When she was convicted and they went to sentencing, all of the family rallied around Sheila. Like, she was this, great person, and it was okay. And so, okay, so what happened next? You think it's like the end of the story, but it wasn't. So come to find out, while Sheila was married to Paul, she was having an affair with Nelson Sessler. And this was someone she worked with at Purdue Pharma. And this is the oddest. I think these are the oddest parts of the story. Amy, do you remember this? Okay. Amy knows where I'm going. She's having an affair with him, right? But she's not having an affair with him necessarily outside of the home. She tells her husband, Paul, like once a month on the weekend, that he needs to leave the house. He needs to vacate the residence because she has a mentally ill brother who needs to come stay with her. And he would be very threatened by her having gotten married. And he doesn't know about this. And Paul is a threat. So once a month she convinces her husband to move out of the house. She takes down all the stuff in the house, all the paint, all the pictures and everything else. And she has Nelson, her boyfriend, over to the house. And so this is one of the methods in which she's carrying out her affair, which I think is pretty
brilliant.
I know I was going to say clever, but I didn't want to sound callous. I don't know.
I mean, it's whew. I mean, it's better than saying you're going out to a movie, you know, like every other night or something. Like, that's a plan. That is commitment.
I mean, it's commitment. It's audacity. I mean, who would ever? I've never heard of anything like this before. Anyway,
I have a quick question. When did he find out about this affair and the whole ruse?
You mean Paul, her husband?
Yeah.
He didn't find out about it until after he was stabbed later on. Jeez.
And was it before or after he supported her in court and his family supported her?
No, I can't be certain, but I believe he knew when he was supporting her.
What a guy.
Love, true love. I don't know what else to say, you know.
Wow.
So she's having this affair, and what happens is that there was, prior to the attempted murder on Sheila's husband, Paul Christos, about a year earlier, Nelson had pretty much, well, this is disputed. Nelson may have broken things off with Sheila, may have not, but started seeing another coworker, and that was Annalisa Raimundo. And things heat up pretty quickly with Nelson and Annalisa. And I think they move in together and they become engaged. And Sheila's not happy. She really wanted to be with Nelson. So she's not thrilled about this situation. And so in 2002, Annalisa was brutally attacked in her condo one night, or one day, I should say, in the afternoon. And she was stabbed several times with quite the scene and quite a bloody trail out the door. And, Sheila Davalloo was convicted of Annalisa's murder. But it's very interesting because that crime was open. They had no idea, no suspects on that crime. They didn't know about Nelson and Sheila. So that crime remains open for a year until Sheila's convicted of the murder of Paul. And then these two police departments are like, is there some kind of connection here? And then they start looking at it and working together. So one's in Connecticut and one's in New York. So the police departments actually worked together on Annalisa's crime. They took a real long time. So they took about 4 years. And they received some criticism for it, but I don't think the criticism really was valid because Sheila was already in prison. They're like, look, we had 25 years to build a case. She was serving 25 years. We wanted to make it airtight. So in that time, they worked on bringing her to trial for Annalisa Raimundo's really brutal attack.
Which she claims she's innocent, though. Right?
Oh, yes. Sheila fully admits that, she tried to kill her husband because what else could she do in that case? You can't really, discount it. But she claims that she is 100% innocent of the murder of Annalisa Raimundo.
What do they have for any evidence that leads to her?
Circumstantial.
Well, they do. They have a couple of things. One of the most damning things was they had her DNA in Annalisa Raimundo's bathroom.
But she was there for some sort of get-together. Right.
She was there for a get-together. Sorry, I'm just looking back at my notes really quickly, too. She was there for a get-together, but it was a year ahead of time. So it really wouldn't explain it. It was like her back bathroom. So they do have the DNA link to Sheila Davalloo, and there's no real other reason except for a party a year ahead of time. So I don't think DNA would remain that long. And also on the day that Annalisa was murdered, Sheila left around lunch and took a very long lunch around the day of that murder. So, okay, we have her doing this long lunch. Also, somebody calls in. They have a female caller, and here was actually the kind of nail in her coffin. Somebody called 911 and said, my neighbor's being attacked. And they described like a location they were calling from. And it was a female saying, my neighbor's being attacked by a man, something to that extent. And so the police respond, and that's how they actually found Annalisa so quickly. But then they have this caller on tape, and they couldn't identify who this caller was. The address wasn't a legit address. So they have at least the voice recognition. And so when they go into court later on, Sheila Davalloo decides that her lawyer in the first case did such a crap job that she's going to represent herself in this case. And so she is speaking to the jury the entire time. And so they convict her. And they said later on, the most damning piece of evidence against her was that we got to hear her voice for so long. And we know that that was her voice in the 911 tape, comparing the two.
Wow.
Never works out. Never works out when they defend themselves.
I thought you were going to say it never works out when you call 911 when you're the assailant, but
that's what I thought he was going to say too. Don't
That
call
too.
911 on
You
yourself.
could go that way too.
Well, so she did that twice. That's weird, huh?
Oh yeah, calling.
No,
911.
she didn't call 911 the first time. She lied to her husband and said that she called 911.
Oh, she never actually called it, but she did drive him near the.
She drove him to the hospital, but remember, she said she called 911 and they were too busy to come get him.
So that was
that's
a
why.
lie. But she
So that
drove
was-
him to the parking lot next to the hospital.
She did drive him, which was nice. She got close enough and then tried to kill him again. They asked her too, like, if you were driving him to the hospital, what's with the second stab? I don't know. I thought he was attacking me then, and I got paranoid. I thought he was mad and he was trying to stab me. Her essential claim to the second one was self-defense.
Self-defense in
Yes.
like his retaliation to her first stabbing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stabbing number 1, stabbing number 2.
Do you think that that she actually is affected with PTSD?
No.
I mean, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know enough about her background to say. She might have been. She was legitimately exposed to some really severe conditions in Iran. Even if she is, though, do I think that explains the crime? No. But then there was also, I'm not sure if you guys caught this, but this was really interesting. So there was a third crime that police wanted to see if Sheila Davalloo was interested in, because they're like, there was this third crime that had a link to her, and they were thinking, do we have a potential serial killer on our hands? So in 2017, they visited Sheila again to ask about the murder of a woman named Nancy Smith. And she was also a former coworker of Sheila's. The murder happened about a year prior to Annalisa's, and Nancy was also stabbed to death in her home. So you have the stabbing, you have a close time frame, you have a coworker, female coworker of Sheila. And so when they were investigating too, on her calendar in her home, this victim, Nancy, had a reference on one of her dates on her calendar. It said Nelson, Connecticut. So remember, Nelson was the guy, the man.
Yeah.
And so the cops are like, boom, we've got this. This was another woman seeing Nelson. This woman is killing all of his romantic rivals. But as it turned out, they were actually, Nelson, Connecticut referred to Nancy going to see the group Nelson. Do you remember the two blonde-haired brothers?
And that's her crime right there.
Yes.
No, the Nelson brothers. Yes.
Do we remember?
Oh, I remember. I was singing it on our pod. I'm like, do you remember the song that they sang? Because I kind of remember that. But
That's Tim and I's costume for Halloween this year.
oh, you guys are going to look. I was going to just envisioning you in the long blonde
Are you going to
hair.
wear it to CrimeCon?
Yeah, I like it.
We're growing it out now.
Definitely.
So anyway, it turned out there was no connection, and they couldn't show any real connection between these two. So likely this is just one of those really weird coincidences.
I just want to say the joke did not go unnoticed that you said that was her crime.
Oh,
going to
thank
see Nelson.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was noted.
How dare you, Lance?
What a crazy coincidence. Seriously, like Nelson wasn't around for that long.
Yes, but they're timeless.
So that's the story of Sheila. If you've seen her, she did an interview with Piers Morgan, and she is very interesting. She's highly intelligent, extremely defiant. She claims that, just so you guys know, her defense is to Annalisa's case is that A, she didn't kill her. B, she always took long lunches like that for some reason because she ate at home. C, that was not her voice, and she could find, some voice expert who would say that wasn't. And we know that's not an exact science, right? So you can get voice analysis that says, yes, that's just like her. No, that's not. So the jury thought it was. But finally, she said that, or she points to contamination. She said that the DNA sample that was taken from Annalisa's sink was the only one to ever leave the crime lab and be sent out for some reasons unknown at this point. And so she says that it was a contaminated sample. That's her defense. Didn't prevail.
Okay.
She still got 50 years in prison. So
Yeah. Wow. So what do you all think? You think she could be a serial killer, or what do you think?
I don't think she has anything to do with that third crime.
No, she's not guilty of the third crime. I think she definitely tried to, in my opinion, at this point, without investigating further, I think she tried to kill. She killed Annalisa because she wanted to get rid of her because she wanted Nelson to herself. And what happened was, after she killed Annalisa, Nelson started seeing her again because he didn't know that she was involved. And she went to him saying, "I'm so sorry about Annalisa. Here, let me comfort you. I'm here to help you." So they start seeing each other again. So Nelson has no idea until later on that he was being comforted in the arms of the woman who killed his fiance, which was really an awful turn of events. So I think that was her plan, to kill Paul, then to be with Nelson completely.
Has there ever been a suspect in the third murder, Nancy's murder? Is that still unsolved?
Yeah, that's still unsolved. And I actually don't know much about that. It'd be interesting, though. Maybe I should follow up with that one. I just know that they were able to exclude Sheila Davalloo from that crime, for sure.
Gotcha.
Wow. What a couple of really fascinating characters you just brought to the table here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know. I'm fascinated.
There's no shortage of people to cover. I'll tell you that.
Especially with the all-encompassing name like Women and Crime.
Well, a lot of the people wind up also becoming, so what we talked about was that the offenders, many of the offenders were victims. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, separate categories. There's not victims / a lot of them are victims and offenders are going to be one and the same. Mm-hmm. But we're also going to cover a couple of, this is a little bit different too. We're going to cover a couple of women whose work in the system, in the criminal justice system, has furthered their system, or for which they're very notable or notorious. So that's a little bit different as well. And I'm kind of excited about that. I'm kind of excited to get away from, murder for a week.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah.